Thank you, everybody, for coming. My name is Diane, and I'm a librarian here at SCPL. I'm just very happy to introduce our moderator for tonight, Derek Tim, Scotts Valley City Council member. Thanks, Derek.
Resume?
That will.
Okay, great. Well, welcome, everyone. I'm so glad you're here tonight. Thank you for coming out for this really important panel. And also want to thank our panelists for being here as well. For those that don't know, we've been working the last couple of years in our county on United Against Hate Week. And we have a wonderful group of individuals that have been volunteering their time and efforts to help make events like this happen and really educate the community and bring awareness around it. And it's really a call for our localities to take action to stop hate and implicit bias in our communities. Because they're really a dangerous threat to our neighborhoods, our communities, and everyone is individuals. So this actually emerged out of a incident that happened in the Bay Area, both Berkeley and San Francisco. There were a couple of white supremacist rallies that took place up there, and several Bay Area cities developed a poster campaign that they were united against hate. And then that took on its own grassroots movement, and it spread through over 200 communities around the state and the country. And so now this is being done during this same week all over the place throughout the country. And I really want to thank our organizing sponsors for this, specifically the Santa Cruz County United for Safe Inclusive Communities. And I know we have some of the members here. I want to thank everyone for their work on that. It's really a wonderful team effort to make these events happen. I want to thank the Temple of Bethel and the Resource Center for Nonviolence, as well as Showing Up for Racial Justice and the Santa Cruz Public Library for helping us put these events on, not only here, but in other areas around our county this past week. So with that, I'd like to welcome our panelists first. And after that, we're going to do a grounding exercise before we begin. But I'd like to each of you, if you could just introduce yourselves, say your name and what led you to be here tonight. That'd be great.
Hi, I'm Frog, she, they, and my good friend Laura told me about this panel and that they were looking for people to be on it, and so I'm here.
Thanks, Frog.
Sylvia Morales, Resource Center for Nonviolence, she, her. I'm just here to represent the work of the Resource Center and also SCUSIC.
Hi, my name is Madeline Rutherford, and I was given the opportunity to speak here tonight, and I feel passionately about the subject of standing against hate, so I'm honored to be able to voice about it.
I'm Chloe. I'm a student intern with the NAACP at UCSD, and so I was working on something with them, which led me to SCUSIC, and then now kind of here.
Thank you all for being here, and I'd like to invite up Muna, who is going to lead us in a grounding exercise before we start. So I'll welcome you up.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay, I am Muna, and it's good to have you all. All right. Well, how about if you feel comfortable? Just let's arrive together in our hearts and bodies, just feeling a little bit settled down in our nervous system. So if you're feeling comfortable, please close your eyes, or you could keep them open. And as we show up together individually and as one unit in this work, we are aware of what's happening now in our bodies and hearts. So if you can just pay attention to what's going on in any part of your body, or maybe your breath. Notice the rhythm. Just ride the waves of your breath. Just observing how you're breathing and how you're feeling. embracing who you are right in this moment. And if there are anxious thoughts of anticipation, or as we all experience fear, anxiety, worry, let them just float in the air in your consciousness. We acknowledge the emotions and thoughts around this, but we are also not held hostage by them. So we allow them to guide us towards our heart calling, while we stay centered and anchored in our breath. If you feel you need to give yourself right now extra care and compassion for who you are and the work you do, or maybe you're tired right now, if you feel comfortable, maybe put a hand on your heart and the other hand on your belly, and just see how you're breathing now. Are you breathing deeper? Like hug yourself in a way with your hands and just breathe deeper if you can. When we are seeing and acknowledging our work and ourselves and giving ourselves care, we can show up more resilient and stronger and more faithful for this work. So let's take a deep breath together, all of us, and exhale. One more. And one last deep breath together. Maybe like say to yourself, thank you for being here. And thank you, all of you, for being here together. And from that centered space, anchored, let's start our evening. Welcome, everyone.
Sylvia, who specializes in helping people through some challenging situations. Maybe you could talk about that before we start. What are some intentions we could set as we go into this?
Well, I think the thing I want to say is that for everybody that's up here, mostly, that, and for myself as well, I'm going to be talking about something that I've experienced recently that I haven't finished processing, and that my sharing about it is difficult and necessary. So I think we all sort of stand in that same space, wanting to share knowledge and experience and share with you what it's been for us. And for us, it's important to take care of ourselves in the process. So I'm not sure what's going to come out of my mouth. Really. I'm hoping that I'll share some valuable things. But like I said, I'm still sort of in it. And so we'll see.
Thank you. And as we go through this, I mean, one of the things that I think we can acknowledge up front is generally in Santa Cruz County, we like to think of ourselves as a safe and inclusive community. But that doesn't mean that there aren't things that have happened and continue to happen where instances of hate show up. And I want to acknowledge some of the hard things we may talk about tonight. We've had hate symbols show up on our campuses, near our students, in our classrooms. We've had defacement of the BLM mural in Santa Cruz. That's covered in the papers. We've had a couple students nearly beat a homeless man to death. So we have these acts of violence that occur. And we've had Santa Cruz, we had someone claiming there was an active shooter on campus. And that's impacted so many people and lives. And these have a profound effect not only on the people that they're experiencing it, but also the people around them and the broader community as a whole. So that's what we want to talk about tonight. And so I'm going to start with questions to our panel. And the first one really is, you could tell us about instances that you have experienced of hate or implicit bias, maybe yourself, or you've seen happen in the community, and how have these incidents affected you or other students, or just your community's sense of safety, well-being, inclusion. Think about that. And Frog, I can put you on the spot if you like, or you can kick it down the road. It's up to you.
I'll kick it down the road.
All right.
Yeah, well, I had an experience. I watched another friend deal with someone that was socially competitive with her. So in social interactions, the person would push her out and try to steal her friends and ignore her, give an extra amount of attention to another person to make her feel like an outsider. And when she was working in a group with this individual, it was hard because they didn't acknowledge her ideas or give her credit for participation, and it made her feel uninvolved. And so there's been situations even where she felt that the person was trying to change how the teachers viewed her, and it was really hard, and she's still having a rough time from it.
Something that's kind of related to both hate and maybe implicit bias is that I was talking with a parent who her son goes to an elementary school in Aptos, and there was a truck there that had the Confederate flag and a bunch of Confederate paraphernalia on the truck, which doesn't necessarily imply like hate or bias. I don't know what their intentions were from that, but it was more the response that she got from other parents and also the school principal and employees at the school when she tried to talk about whose truck that was, or if it was possible to get it moved because it was there last school year and then it was there also this school year. And so I think that's also maybe an instance of implicit bias in the school system where she can't even really sit down and have a conversation with anyone about how she's feeling and what it feels like to go to school every day and see that there.
Yeah, so the thing that I want to talk about mostly is the incident at Santa Cruz High. Luckily, okay. And the reason I want to speak about it is because, my daughter has been pretty impacted by the event. She's a student there. It's taken a very interesting turn, though. Mostly, so luckily she and I were headed to school when we got the news, so she wasn't actually on campus. But she was getting the calls from all of her friends. They were basically in lockdown in their individual classrooms, in bathrooms. They were there for hours and hours and hours, for the majority of the time not knowing whether there was anybody on campus, whether anybody had been killed or not. So luckily, the whole of it ended. Nobody was hurt. But subsequent to that, and I don't know if people heard about it, there was another threat made on Monday. The threat came in on Saturday. Nobody had noticed that it had come in until Monday late morning. But she was at school that day. And the threat, so the thing that was really difficult, and I still haven't really communicated with anybody about it, but the threat was announced to the parent population. The exact words that were used, the identity, the racial identity of the minor, and it just so happened that the minor was Latino identified, and his threat was towards white students. So I don't know why that was released, because it created a really complicated, already existing tension between racial groups. Since then, I have gotten a lot of reports back to me from my daughter that's Latina about how she's being treated. It's been really difficult, and really I'm having to seriously consider taking her and putting her in a different space, mostly because I don't think there's been any sort of attempt to mitigate the damage that has created and that will continue to manifest in an environment that's mixed race. So I do appreciate the way the police department and the way that the school handled the initial event. I just don't understand why the information was released the way that it was. And I don't understand how nobody foresaw that there can be a direct impact on all Latino students on campus. And so now you have this learning environment that has this underlying racial tension that isn't being addressed. So that's what I wanted to raise awareness around. And I'm it's interesting because I do the work of our center is to do nonviolence work and peace work in the community. And I answer to a lot of different things in the community, but when it comes to my own things, it's paralyzing. So, I'm still in the space where I'm trying to figure out how do I protect her from things like, for instance, she was recently on the weekend at a party, and somebody said in front of her, she witnessed a group of white boys saying to one another about another Latina that was in the space, "Hurry up, we got to get out of here. We don't need to be around her." So, and there were some other things said about her as well. So I guess what I'm saying is I can see the escalation of bias and hostility towards Latino identified students on and off campus. And it just worries me that it's going to lead to another incident, that hostilities will continue to grow, and that nothing's being done to address it.
Do you have ideas on how we could effectively work with leaders in our community, on messaging? That impact clearly was a blind spot for the administration when they sent that out. What could we do to?
Well, I have a lot of experience working in schools, and I have a lot of experience working to try to create safe spaces for students of color in our community. I've been doing this work for about, more than 8 years. I think there's a reluctance to admit that we have racial tension in our campuses. There's a reluctance to admit that we have blind spots. There's a reluctance to take race into account in any way whatsoever. There's a reluctance to get it wrong. So as long as we don't talk about it, as long as we don't take it into account, as long as we pretend it's not real, as long as we don't have a way to have those voices be heard, then nothing's ever going to happen. And then what you have is, if you don't have a safe learning environment where you feel included, then you're not learning really. So for a good majority of our students in our schools, school just doesn't work. I mean, my students, my kids in particular, they've struggled in a lot of ways. And I have tried everything I know how to do to mitigate damage and to try to talk through solutions and to try to make sure that school is a safe place for them so that they're excelling and thriving and happy. And, it's been really hard for me. And I have a law degree and I do this work. And my husband's a lawyer and we're college educated and we've been in this community for 20 years. And I can go on and on and on. So if it's hard for me, and I have all kinds of agency, it's hard for a lot of people. So, we need to stop being afraid to talk to each other. And there needs to be more openness, because even when I come to the table with solutions, oftentimes I'm met with denial, defensiveness, deflection, and retaliation, not against just me, but my children and their friends or whoever we're trying to whatever we're trying to address. And the retaliatory conduct, I cannot protect them from that. I can't be in their spaces with them every single day. So what I've had to do is to equip my children to speak up for themselves, to try to mitigate conflict between them and their teachers. But we're talking about young people trying to bring adults along, which that is not right or equitable. So anyway.
No, thank you. And I feel those comments. We have kids the same age and share a lot of similarities in our lives. And I have close friends that particular day. It's heartbreaking to get a call or a text from your daughter saying, "I love you," and there's an active shooter on campus, right? And what that feels like, right? But then to have an incident where communication goes out and creates a whole nother level of divisiveness is awful. And so, getting together in a space and being able to address it. I'd like to hear from some of the people who, either recent graduates or in school now, ideas that you have about how we can, how you're handling that on campus or in your lives, like what you see happening. We talked about instances of bullying. We talked about instances of hate symbols. We brought up this incident. Like what do you have ideas around how you handle that or how your schools handle it?
Yeah, that's the question I have the most thoughts on. So I think what we have to do is we have to build community. We have to build strong community and work, each of us, to connect with our neighbors and our friends and our wider community, to build these support networks, to support each other, because like charity services and school services and county programs are never going to be flexible enough or accessible enough to everybody to meet everyone's needs, and we can't rely on them for everything, unfortunately, as much as I'd love if we could. And relating this to like student harassment, for example, as for kids being harassed, like I know very few people who actually went to the school for help when they were being harassed. I sure didn't. for many reasons and for really concrete reasons, like kids are afraid of mandated reporting due to peers being outed by staff to their parents, which causes huge real damage, or for horrendous treatment of people with mental illness, which I'm not going to get into the details right now. But who I did go to help with were peers and trusted adults that I myself met with like the DSA, socialist and anarchist groups, but I shouldn't go to the school or my parents. And so we need those networks. And as for bullies and such, it relates to this thing in our society where we otherize people and we have this concept of away. We say, oh, the homeless, when talking about our victimized neighbors. And we say criminals, we say to send them away to prison, which is just concentrating what the state sees as violence in one place, making it worse, and just making those people's lives horrible, and concentrating them together. So where in reality, with theft, for example, most theft is out of need. Like if I can't afford food or baby formula, I'm going to steal it to survive, because if I don't, I won't survive. And so don't send this person to suffer in prison, give them food and baby formula. And so in a less direct relation, kids who commit violence don't do so in a vacuum. We have to recognize how people get to that place. And a part of this is one of the primary tactics that fascists use to recruit people is they find vulnerable, lonely people, mostly boys and men, and they come in and say, you're awesome, we're here for you, you're valuable, in more white supremacist words. And anyone in that position is probably going to go, wow, hey, these people actually appreciate me and want to be around me. And I'm not used to that. These people rock. What do they have to say? What are they into? And so we must provide a loving community alternative for these people so that they don't go down that pipeline. And of course, it's not the responsibility of like for bullies, for example, like for their peers in school to provide this community. But it's the responsibility of the wider community to build networks so that we can support each other, so that we have the capacity to support people, so that we can support both victims and perpetrators in ways that are productive. Because every person, even if they're doing horrible things, they need some personal advocate. And that's not a personal advocate who's going to excuse their behavior or who's going to congratulate it or ignore it. But everybody needs a person who's going to talk to them person to person and figure out why they're doing bad things and how to get them out of that place, and to do that, we have to foster a community where we don't see criticism and critique as inherently antagonistic. We have to see critique as an act of love. Accountability is an act of love. It's saying, I think you're worth the time and the energy and effort to get you to a better place, so you're not hurting people and you're not suffering through hurting people yourself. I think you're worth it to try to help you grow. But we automatically see critique as antagonistic, and we automatically critique in an antagonistic way. Yeah.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah. I resonated with a lot of that. The othering concept is so powerful. It cuts across, racial lines, cuts across so many different communities in so many different ways. And it can be the kid on campus who's being bullied. It can be, like you said, someone who's cast as a criminal, right? But all they were trying to do was get food, right? But that building community network, I appreciate you really bringing that up. Saying, and others want to share what they're doing in their lives and campuses to combat this. Yeah. Absolutely. So we're going to have a discussion, and then sorry. So yeah, we're doing a discussion, and following the discussion, there's going to be a chance for people to ask questions. And so the discussion is first talking about incidents of hate, and then we're going to follow that with resources as well that are available. So right now, the idea is to have some of the youth speak out about what's going on campuses. I want to make that clear. Thank you for asking.
Yeah. So adding on to what Frog said about peers who maybe like feeling like they're being bullied or harassed and they don't go to the staff, they go to other peers instead. Our school has incorporated the Hope Squad program, which I'm a member of. And so we are there for students who need to talk because they feel like they're going through something tough, or they're, someone else is messing with them, or they're being bullied. And we are not mandated reporters. So we don't, tell everything that we hear to the staff, but yet we have the trainings to help those students. And so it just makes the campus a safer space that they know that we're here. And so if they're going through trouble, there's people that they can talk to that they know will keep their information safe.
That's a really great way of building community, and it goes right to your point.
Yeah, I was going to say with what I talked about earlier with the Confederate flag at the elementary school, and then also what I saw in high school, and then also what I see now on the UCSD campus, where there are instances of hate. It's a very similar kind of thread of going to the system of power somewhat sterilizes the very human thing that you were feeling, and institutionalizes it in a way that that hurts a lot, and takes away from what you were feeling. So I think that a lot of different people have experienced that, and that's why students turn to their peers, because you get a real human response to what you're feeling. And it feels like someone is listening to you and hearing you in a way that, going to an administrator who you may have to schedule an appointment with, and sit and have a 15-minute time slot, it's just very different. And I think that, yeah, it is important to build community. I know in any instance where I've ever had an instance of hate happen to me, I've never talked to an administrator about it. And the only time that I have, it made me feel worse. So I think that it doesn't have to be that way, but I think that having it be something different means changing the way that the institution is run, and the relationship between administrator and student, or teacher and student, because building community should be about your peers, but it also is great to have, a mixed age community. And I think it is important to be able to talk to people of all different groups, and feel comfortable in that kind of way. I think that that's just harder in the institution. But I think that, yeah, like what everyone else has been saying about building community is really necessary. Just trying to use radical love in a way that changes the relationship between like higher up,
That's great. Any ideas on how within that school community, or what you need from leadership, like what would it take for them to help build an environment that's safe, inclusive, and would really speak to that, but that would make it safer for students? Is it really just peers working with other students, or how do you get those leaders? What would be your advice to leadership?
It seems like something like the program you're doing is really, really cool. What the school is doing with that. Maybe having, yes, it starts, I think, with a strong peer involvement, and kind of like going up from there. So, having like programs like this, or whatever you guys are doing, and then going up from there, and having also kind of recognizing as if you are in a leadership position, you know, recognizing what that may entail and kind of how you are treating other human beings, you know, and because I think it is easy to get bogged down, but trying to like recognize the humanity in people when you're talking with them about difficult things like that. Yeah.
That's great. I think the other piece to talk about too is just allyship, friends. You know, when you see something occur, how do you intervene and how do you do that in a way that works? You know, like you brought up, Sylvia, an example of your daughter at a party and something happened. Well, I don't know if that entire friend group agreed with what that kid said that was so awful, but no one stood up, no one did anything. And so, and it may not be safe to do that in that environment. And any recommendations on what you can do as a friend or an ally to help when you see something, incidents of hate occurring? Or have a thought on that?
I think that's a really important thing to talk about. In one of the conversations that I've had with my daughter recently, you know, we talk about the things that she experiences. I talk her through, you know, the things that she comes to say to me, and I, you know, I try to get her to be reflective. But one of the things that she has shared is that it's not so much what is done. It's the indifference around the experience that's the most harmful. It's the lack of care that there's an impact. It's the lack of even noticing or caring to notice. So it's the absence. It's really the blinders that we carry that do the most damage. It's not necessarily the silly words or the person that called me or her, you know, whatever people call us sometimes, you know, the silly, mean things that they call. We hear those things. It's the indifference around it. So it doesn't take that much to stop people. You just have to say, hey, don't. You know, it doesn't take that much. You just have to be willing to do it. And it's more powerful when it comes from people that are identified with the group that's actually doing it. So yeah, just encouraging people to actually just use their words. And if they catch something happening that doesn't feel right or sound right, express that. So, you know, in my work, and Moon and I have a lot of experience together in this work. One of the things that I've really relied on is my own body awareness around, you know, when I'm asked to speak about things that have happened, or when I'm asked to talk about anti-racism, when I'm asked to talk about race relation, any of the things that create sort of a space where I have to, you know, open myself up, right, and be vulnerable. One of the things I've learned to do is to check in with my own body when I'm in that process. So I'm saying that to other people. If you're an ally and you want to be an ally, if it doesn't feel right in your body, if you get an icky feeling when you hear someone say something to another person, you can say that. You can say, that didn't feel right. It doesn't feel right in my body what you just said to them. You know, so it can be really healing to be able to articulate that for you, because it does. What's happening is your inability, and when you go against yourself and don't do the right thing, you're damaging yourself. I mean, that's just what it is. So it's not healthy for us to witness each other being horrible to one another. It damages our sense of self. It damages our sense of safety. It leaves you with something that has to go somewhere, right? So
I like what you said, because people can't argue with how you feel.
mhm.
And when you say to them, that didn't feel right to me, they can't come back to you and say, they can't argue with that. Hey, And I really, I saw this happen. I think also not being afraid to be the first to offer in an instance like that is important as well, because you'd be surprised how many other people stand up. I saw it happen recently in our school district where we had a parent forum on inclusion. And the discussion was supposed to be just around building a language that people could share. And someone showed up really to spread hate. And this person came in really hot and started attacking one of the other parents who had asked a question. This parent was Asian, and this was in the middle of a lot of the Asian hate, not just happening then, but still happening now. And she turned her camera off. She was scared. But what happened was when this person started attacking this person, it was on Zoom, someone stood up and said, "I support you." And then you saw all the other people that were participating saying the same thing. But it took one person to say, "I support you," and realize that the person who was attacking her was alone, right? That person spreading hate was alone. And everyone else there was very much in support of that person. That really, I talked to her after that experience. That really changed her life and her opinion, and she didn't feel alone anymore. She was in it, and has actually developed a lot stronger voice because of it. So, other thoughts on the same subject? Sure. Does that bring anything up for anyone? Rob?
Yeah, I just wanted to agree with that. That can be huge. In any kind of setting with, like, even just like, there's a space called Sabrosa where we have meetings and events, and sometimes this person comes by selling tamales. And like every time they'll come in and they'll be like, "Does anyone want to buy a tamale?" And like no one says anything. But then the first word, after like a solid silence, like one person will finally be like, "I mean, oh yeah, I want some food. I'll buy a tamale." And then like everyone else is like, "Yeah, I'll have it." So it's with everything in our societal experience that can have a huge effect on. And the other thing I wanted to say was something that schools can do, or at least in my experience with my school, Santa Rosa Valley High in Felton, is explicitly allowing students to organize themselves. Because an issue that we had at our school was we were like, the school's not doing all of these important things, and the school's doing all of these very harmful things. So we're gonna, and they haven't listened to us for the past 15 years, so we're gonna organize ourselves. And so we started these clubs and groups and everything. And one of the things that we were doing was we were buying people chest binders to help with dysphoria. And so we put, so like trans men or trans non-binary people who have boobs and feel really gross, and it's called dysphoric by having boobs. Some people will use like a tight sports bra or something, but there's a specific item called a chest binder that's like the medically safe, if made correctly, thing to make your chest look smaller so you feel less gross about having one. And so we were putting up posters offering this. We were like, do you need free chest binders? We'll buy one for you. Here's all these other things that we'll do. And the school got a complaint from a parent. One parent called in because they were transphobic and they didn't want these posters up helping out trans people. And so the principal, without saying a word, by the way, I emailed the principal. I sent him the pictures of these posters. I was like, "Can we put up these posters?" And not only did he give the okay, he like came to me in class and was like, "This is great. Keep it up. Good job." And I was like, "Oh, cool, thanks." But then the second one parent is like, "I don't like that," he, without saying anything to me, people saw him around going down, tearing down all the posters. And the same thing happened with the Black Student Union. They put up posters for the Black Student Union, and one parent called in and was like, "I don't like," a white parent was saying, "I don't like the language on this poster." And without saying a word, he went around and tore down all the posters. And so there's this facade of great, good job, keep it up, we support you. But the moment there's any kind of even the smallest backlash from parents, then they go the complete opposite way. And it's like, there were some events where I didn't even understand, because like so there's the California laws that you have to put period products, tampons and such in school bathrooms. And none of the bathrooms have had any of those in it. And the school wasn't putting them in when we were asking them to. So we went to Dollar Tree and bought pads and tampons and built these little dispensers and stuck them in there so people can grab free pads and tampons. And the school took them away over and over and over and over again. And we replaced them like 8 times in all the bathrooms. And they kept taking them away. The RGDs and the principals would take them away. And then what was funny was the school then put up posters and they said, Cougar Closet, after this has happened for like the 8th time. They said, Cougar Closet, come to the office, because we have the Cougar Closet where we have pads and tampons and socks and all of the things that we were providing for free that they had confiscated. And so then one day, well, first off, not a lot of people are going to want to go up to the office and be like, hey, can I have a tampon? That's super awkward. Just leave them in the bathrooms. But one day I needed socks because I forgot socks and it was PE. Or in this unit, we needed socks. So I went up there. And one of the things on the posters is, we have socks, come get socks. So I went up to the office. I was like, hey, can I get socks? Because the Cougar Closet thing. And they were like, that's a really weird request, right? And I was just like, dude. So like, just like allowing students, like not even not doing the bad things, but just allowing students to organize themselves is important.
That's a great point. It's a great point. And I think there can often, we've talked about that disconnect between what the intention is and what the administration is actually. Any other thoughts from other student panelists on?
Yeah, well, adding on to that, at our school, we've got our student government, and that's pretty much the way that our students organize themselves. That like a lot of the events or activities that are hosted at our school is completely student driven, and luckily the staff do collaborate with us, and so it just makes it easier. And like we all, in student government, we all get a part in organizing these things, and it brings the rest of the school together as a community. And so, it feels like we're really like setting an example and just like, hey, come join us, we're doing this at lunch or whatever. And students like actually come. And it's nice because it feels like, we're doing this on our own and we feel more like adults and like we're running ourselves, and it's just really great. Mm-hmm.
Chloe, anything to add?
I was just gonna say, well, I guess I don't know, like you had mentioned a little bit ago about, or what everyone was talking about being the first person to kind of say something. I was thinking about how also that changes depending on where you are in life, and if you have the the skills that it takes to stand up for yourself in that kind of way. And in high school, I think especially like social capital and insecurities get in the way of that a lot. And so I think that it's a lot more difficult then, to say something than at any other stage in life, and how there can be resources or tools, for people to like feel okay in themselves in order to then be able to do something about that. Because definitely even the difference of like being in high school and then being in college and seeing people talk to other people and communicate when they don't like something is different, and that's not that much time. So I mean, I think that's important too for helping people develop the skills to feel comfortable in themselves, to be able to be okay going against what they think is the majority when it might not be.
I think that's a very valid and valuable statement, because it is hard in those situations to stand up, especially with the social pressures in school. And I certainly wasn't confident enough at that age, but I'll tell you, it's not even always easier when you get older to be confident in that, because the social pressures continue to be there. And so I do think that coaching on the strength around that is important, and teaching kids how to build that strength. And I like the Hope Support Group because it really gives an opportunity for kids to do that. I know we do have time pressures tonight, so there's a few things I want to cover. I think, Sylvia, I'd like to ask you specifically about what people should do if they think they have either seen or been a victim of a hate incident or crime. What's the step that they should take?
We have a booklet that SCUSIC, Santa Cruz County United for Safe and Inclusive Communities, put together. So it has a ton of resources in here. I think the most important thing really to do is, and that's a really complicated question because there definitely is a distinction between a hate crime and an incident. Not everything rises to the level of a crime, of course. So, but in any institution that you belong to, there are phone numbers you can call in here if you witness something, if you experience something out in the world, in the community. But if you're in a school setting, definitely reach out to trusted teachers, talk to your parents. Don't suffer in silence. SCUSIC is a great space, a great group of people to reach out to, the Resource Center for Nonviolence. One of the things that we're trying to do is to create resources for parents to support their kids and their students. There's just, say something, look for support, and pick up one of these and pass these around because there's really great resources all throughout the county.
That's great. Any of the students have any specific things that they have at their schools or that other students should be aware of that they found valuable? No, that's okay.
I would say, like, for us, it's pretty much Hope Squad covers that.
Sounds like a pretty cool thing.
I was just wondering, like, one thing I was very proud of, not only in the high school, but there's fashion club and journal club, and these kids get to pick what club they would like to participate in. But what about if there was a club on this subject where they got to come together and talk just like we are here in this room, and then bring ideas about how to.
Yeah, we have a few alliance clubs, but I mean, nothing super specific to this subject. I think we could incorporate that. It's a good idea.
Yeah. I think on this subject, an individual feels shy to start it or to participate, but if one person started it.
We'll pass around. So we do have people on Zoom, and so I want to acknowledge that they may not be able to hear questions. So, and actually, this is a natural time for our question section. You nailed it. So, and the point, if people weren't able to hear, is allowing students to create groups on campus specifically around this issue. And I think most campuses allow students to create groups. And so maybe one of the things that comes out of this is within campuses creating, like, that's something that could be added. And I know, it's interesting too, because I talked to someone whose child recently got into one of the top schools, and they were going through the college application process. And the school specifically was looking for people that were working on kindness. That's what they wanted to see in their class, and that's what they wanted to have people coming in. And so developing these things, it's a lifelong skill that will carry you on far. Questions? I saw a hand, and we'll go around the room. So if we want to, Diane will pass the mic around.
I wonder if the panel is aware of nonviolent communication, the work of Marshall Rosenberg, and the group that actually has a chapter here in Santa Cruz, which is Center for Nonviolent Communication. And so that has had really good advocacy in prisons, kindergartens, elementary schools, high schools, in conflict resolution and the acquisition of skills lifelong in every possible application for the use of nonviolence, using a different way of communicating and being aware of the inherent violence of languaging.
Yeah, thank you. I'll pass that to Sylvia, and I know I don't know if that's incorporated within our SCUSIC,
I don't know.
but if it's
I don't think
not,
so.
we might want to add that in there.
Can I take? Oh,
Yeah, go ahead. You don't need
So
to.
yeah, I thank you for bringing that up, because one of the things that was really important to me was to, here I'm going to out myself, to learn how to parent differently than my parents parented me. So I stood against my parents at the age of 18, and I said, no more. No more violence in this world for me. So I literally drew the line in the sand. And just, I left my family for 2 years until they were willing to readmit me into the family with no more violence. It was a really hard 2 years. It was really hard. So I'm just saying, I'm committed to the nonviolence. But what happened was that when I became a parent, I had a lot of these tendencies that I didn't know were going to come up. So then I enrolled myself in preschool and parent education in the SoCal Parent Education Program, SoCal PENS. And I did about 4 years of that and attended preschool with my kids and learned how to do nonviolent. Well, it's called positive discipline. So I had to relearn how to discipline my children, how to discipline, period. And that, I think, was really my reprogramming. That I will say, I was tracking how long it took me. It took me about 10 years to really get a handle on how to parent in a positive way. And I had to reprogram the way that I saw and the way that I interacted with my children, because I did not want to perpetuate another generation of raising kids that were fearful of their parents, that were disconnected, that were full of fear. I just didn't want that. I didn't want that. It was an experiment for me, but I knew that I didn't want it in my life when I stood up to my own family, and I didn't want to perpetuate it in my own children. So I committed myself, and I didn't know how long it was going to take. It took me like 10 years. That's a long time. So, and then I dedicated myself to nonviolent work as a career path. So, thank you for bringing that up, because that's important.
I'm curious if the topic would be willing, the panel would be willing to address the homeless backlash and hatred and violence in this county, because it is a really strong topic. Everyone's discussing it, but no one's actually discussing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. I will kick it off to the panel. Anyone have thoughts they'd like to share around? I know you brought some up already, Frog. So yeah.
I think thinking doing this on the spot, but I think one of the things that's a big issue is how the city of Santa Cruz and every government around here really deals with the housing crisis. Is first off, we think of it as a homeless. We use the language of the homelessness issue instead of the housing crisis. It's not an issue that homeless people exist. It's an issue that there's not enough housing that is adequate and accessible for everybody. And the way that we deal with the housing crisis under this mindset of it's a homeless crisis is we use methods that are not helpful to homeless people, but are helpful to the profits of businesses and the comfort of tourists. And so instead of giving homeless people support, true, real support, we create these, well, what we mostly do is evict people and kick them around all over the place. Like people will be evicted multiple times a month, sometimes multiple times a week. But it's really a constant moving around. And when you're moving around all the time and you have to pick up all of your belongings and move your tent often by foot, or if you're living in an RV and you get ticketed, you can't pay your tickets because you can't afford rent either. That's why you're living in an RV. And then your RV gets impounded. Now you're living in a tent, and then you get kicked out of your tent, and you only have what you can have what you can carry, and you've got your backpack, your pots and pans, your food, survival items. You might not be able to carry your tent or your sleeping bag or your blanket, and you're ending up in these worse and worse and worse situations every time that you're evicted. And it's impossible to get a foothold or to get a job. You know, you can't reliably get to a job if you're being evicted from where you're living all the time. And so we criminalize houselessness instead of actually supporting houseless people, which is like, it's not just, it's a much deeper issue than the current active ordinances that we create and such. It goes all the way back to this country's beginning, where we made the 13th Amendment and we abolished slavery except for the punishment of a crime. And so now all of these people who were previously enslaved are no longer providing free labor to the United States to build and support infrastructure like railways and such. And so where are we going to get all of this labor? And so they put the clause, except for a punishment of a crime. And so then we criminalized poorness, we criminalized houselessness, we criminalized blackness, and so, which basically funneled a large number of previously enslaved people into the prison system and back to providing this free labor. And so, and that's where our country is founded on. So we're used to, and it's ingrained in the inherentness of our systems to criminalize people who are oppressed as opposed to helping them. I looked at the funding. My mom works for the county, so I get some little insights sometimes. And this was back in 2017, I want to say, somewhere around there. I looked at the funding that the city had dedicated to it, like the homelessness fund. I forget the exact phrasing. And the largest spending item was on floodlights, which you might think that floodlights don't really help houseless people, do they? No, they put floodlights in places where they just evicted hundreds of people, such as Ross Camp or the San Lorenzo Park benchlands, so that they can't sleep. And if they do try to sleep there, then they'll be kept awake all night. And so since the city obviously is doing all of these horrible, horrible things, we can't rely on the city to fix these. Again, we have to create community networks to help with these issues. And we have to connect with, that's why when I say connect with your friends and family, I say wider community, because we isolate ourselves oftentimes. And so house people don't end up connecting with unhoused people. And we end up with this behavior where, whether consciously or not, we see someone who's unhoused. And if you're housed, you might cross the street or like look straight forward, walk forward. Someone asks for money, you don't say anything. You could at least say, no, sorry. You could stop and have a conversation. And we need to humanize people and provide physical, material support for people, and not just think about how horrible it is. We have to actually get involved in the community and go build networks like Food Not Bombs, and go beyond food also. Help people out.
You know, it's such a complicated issue, and I know, I mean, we could have a forum on that alone tonight, and I know there are other questions. So, yes.
Before I ask the question, I actually wanted to thank the panel for participating tonight, and I really particularly appreciate that the younger people are willing to step out and say have these difficult conversations. It's really important to begin with that. And I wanted to address something that Derek had mentioned earlier in terms of an additional resource that at SCUSIC we this week offered for people 3 bystander intervention trainings. And if anyone is interested in these, you either go to the library website, they're already done for this week, but there's a group called Right to Be that offers these trainings that gives individuals the skills and the courage also to recognize events and ways to safely intervene. And I think it's a really important part of this whole conversation and a way of offering skills. So anyway, thank you again. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you for raising where people can find that resource as well. I know we had another question here.
Oh, thank you. My name is Abram. It's nice to meet you all and see you all here. Frog said something that was very moving to me towards the beginning. That's why I was like, can I ask a question now? So he talked about critique or accountability as an act of love. Critique and accountability as an act of love. And I have a couple questions on that for the youth here, because I want to discover a new way. And I know we have some good ideas, but I want to hear something new, So it's a little edge in my question, but like, what do you think is so challenging about this for people in our society? The critique and accountability as an act of love. I'd love to hear that.
Yeah. Okay. I think the biggest thing is that like we learn from what we've been taught, and what we've seen, and no system of power will teach you that critique and accountability is an act of love. Like you won't see that in, you might not see that in your family dynamic. You will definitely not see that in a school system. It is an institution, right? Without a lot of active work. So I think that it's kind of changing the whole way that you think about the world and you think about yourself and community and what it means to be part of something. Because it's just, you just have to relearn that. I just don't think that critique is generally a negative thing. So
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, we learn when we're young, and the behaviors, that influence us usually stem from like family and friends who we're hanging around. And so, if we're not learning about that when we're young, it's like we kind of have to reincorporate that into our methods when we're older and just kind of reprogram our minds.
Yeah.
Sylvia, do you want to comment?
I have a lot to say about that. So I did, there's a link up there. There's a YouTube video called.
We're going to show that video.
Oh, we are?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Okay.
We're going to end on that.
Okay,
Great.
perfect. Yeah, the only thing I want to say about that is that in the work that I'm involved in, which is nonviolence work, and really anti-racism work as well. One of the things that has sort of gelled in my mind around creating. So we talk a lot about diversity, equity, and inclusion. You can't really, diversity is amazing, but unless you have the equity portion is the difficult part for people. So in a relationship built on inequality, there's no accountability. You can't hold someone accountable that doesn't value you as an equal. So we don't know how to hold each other accountable. We don't know how to be in relationship with each other. So it's really finding ways to create accountability. And when I say accountability, I don't mean in the traditional sense that we think. When I say accountability, I mean how do we begin to be in relationship to one another as equals?
That's exactly kind of not what I was getting to, but what was coming up in me, why I wanted to ask the question, and you two spoke to that specifically. We simply have to restructure the whole way we go about living our entire lives based on the collective learning that we have. And you're saying, well, it just has to do with understanding equity and right relationship and then forming a plan from there. I'm like, oh my God. So I just wanted to like have that point, that 0 point of like, this is where we're starting from, that most people don't have tools. It's super scary and threatening to even talk about it, let alone enter into like restorative plans. So I think it's an important thing to like take a breath from there and say, that's where we're headed together in this little room. But it's a big deal. And that's what your comment really sent that home for me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. I didn't know this was happening. I was sitting in the library and it was announcing and they said there'd be coffee. But I'm really glad I showed up or walked 10 feet. But what I hear a lot in this room, and I would expect it at most congregations like this, people who have themselves either been victims or, recognized finally that they were victimizing other people, right? And are dealing with it on a very personal level. And that's amazing. It has to happen, right? I mean, it has to happen. We live in the now, right? But I want the 1,000-foot view or the 1,000-mile. Although I'm so in support of all this happening, how do we get to a place where it doesn't have to happen anymore? Where at the societal level, like Frog was saying, am I saying your name right? Frog? Okay. We get to a place where there's no longer a need to repair oneself or one's community. It doesn't seem like the amount of resources necessary would break the bank ever, and it would certainly increase the size of the bank if we're talking about society in general. Why? How do we get from here to there? And what I'm specifically saying is I hope that because it just so happens that this issue is saddled on the people who have been victimized. Those are the people the most motivated, right? I'm here by accident. So I'm looking at it from the outside. I had this ridiculous, healthy white boy, great parents, upbringing. And, but I've always seen that this trauma that's constantly perpetrated and this basic human need to be better than other people, to other people, to feel good about oneself by making others feel less good about, or what Frog was saying about moving the problem somewhere else, right? And if that's our basic human instinct, and I really think it is, but evolved in us, all of us carry it, then what is the cost? Because we have to pay this cost to protect ourselves and our society from this perpetuating, because if it's our basic human nature, and I don't think it's that expensive to provide the armature necessary to keep us from doing what us do. And we've seen examples in Northern European countries, or what looked like examples until immigration started happening there. But they're on a road that we haven't quite achieved here in the United States. We have all this money, and we don't seem to tie it to making a more safe society and more productive society, right?
Thank you for bringing.
I mean, I think about when I was going to school and the kids that were involved in trauma that I didn't even understand. And later thinking back, like I remember one time I didn't go to a job interview because the shirt I wanted to wear wasn't clean. And I remember sitting there after I made the decision and it was too late to go. And I remember thinking of all the people who never had that particular white problem to deal with, and how do they get to interviews when there's 10,000 pounds of issues on their shoulders every single moment of their lives, right? And why isn't society stepping in to make it the equity word, right? To make it equal in some way.
I want to say something about.
Sorry, I went off.
No. I think it's an important point that you raised. You're right that some of us have the luxury of not having to be self-reflective.
And people that don't have the luxury.
Many of us
to make it all happen.
have the luxury and of never having to be self-reflective, of completely ignoring anything and everything around you because you're comfortable. So it's the self-reflective part that's really needed. And, you know, it has to come to you. I mean, I can't heal you and you can't heal me, right? It's not your job to heal me, nor is it my job to heal you. Sure, but every infrastructure is it's people. We have to have human-centered organizations, human-centered businesses, human-centered schools, not profit, not all the things that we have currently, and it takes individuals. So the awakening is individual. It's and then we're creating the systems. We're creating the systems. But this is it. It's us.
I think an individual being able to put them in a place of the understanding of others. So, Madeline, what book did you write? You have to read your name and say that was made me cry.
Esmeralda the Rising.
And that didn't relate to.
Oh, I was about to.
My children are growing up. But we have such a sense of understanding for that book that my kids were laughing at me because I was crying so hard trying to get through the chapter because of what this character was going through with another. And I think that if an individual could just stop and just think of others and try to put themselves in someone else's shoes or understanding what their life might be like, what they might be going through that nobody knows about. That goes for students too. They're dealing with some very tough life complications with other individuals in a learning environment. And they feel like they can't speak up. That I'm going through this and I'm doing this and so they're being strong and silent. Madeline comes home and she knows she can tell me anything and I'm there to listen and there to help her in any way that she needs me. Not every student has that. And I think she's got a lot of compassion and understanding and her peers voted her to be on Hope Squad. And she keeps with her experience and understanding for others, caring for others. And if there's more programs like that in the schools with more individuals in those programs, it's a start.
Thank you. And I can make one more question, and then we're going to go to the video. Okay.
I'd like to reflect on hope. I'm a student of anthropology and history and culture worldwide. And I've noticed a trend in people being more aware of their conduct, using more critical thinking, using more peer approval of appropriate and life-affirming behaviors, and a coercion and shunning of those people who demonstrate bullying and quiet violence, the kind of persistent violence that isn't totally obvious, but is actually soul crushing. So I can tell you, as somebody who's studied ministry and also nonviolence and also youth, help, working in that field, that there's more awareness and it's quicker and faster. And slowly inherited systems that are outdated and harmful are being supplanted and replaced by a healthier kind of culture of tolerance, and also seeing the other person. That's the first step from childhood into adulthood, is to be able to look past your own needs, your own selfishness, and see someone else's suffering. And so I'm seeing that sooner and sooner, and I'm seeing it very persistent. And so I just wanted to interject a little bit of hope in that bullying will eventually become so socially inappropriate that it won't be used. Like, it will be immediately peer squelched. Like, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And I'm seeing it sooner and sooner. Hope.
That hope, yeah. And it also actually ties perfectly into what they're getting ready to show now, which is accountability. I think we're gonna put it up on the screen. So thank you for that.
Hi, it's Rob Bonta, California Attorney General, proudly joining you in the fight against hate. Hate is a vicious disease, a virus that can only be stopped if we stand together. This United Against Hate Week, that's exactly what we're doing at this event and across the state. Standing together in solidarity to say unequivocally that we all belong. That's the California story. We don't just tolerate diversity, we celebrate it, we harness it. It's our ultimate strength. But even here in the Golden State, the most diverse place in the nation, we're not immune from the dangerous forces of hate. I've felt these forces personally. So many have. From racist, anti-Semitic, and xenophobic slurs to hate crimes targeting our communities and loved ones. In fact, this summer, my office released stark new statewide data that shows reported hate crimes increased by over 32% in the last year. There's no single solution to this crisis, but what I do know is that we're going to solve this crisis of hate together. That's why I launched DOJ's Racial Justice Bureau, our Office of Care, and issued new resources for all of us to combat hate. Because from law enforcement to the public, we all have a role. We must all be united against hate. That's how we fight back. This week, every week. Hate is not new, but neither is solidarity, the act of coming together. That's the California story, and it's our ultimate strength in fighting hate. Thank you.
The slide that was up earlier also has the link to the video. Oh, there it is. Yeah, what is accountability on YouTube? Thank you to the panel and our moderator here. You guys are. So I also want to invite everyone here to take one of these booklets from Santa Cruz County United for Safe and Inclusive Communities, GUSIC for short, which has just a wealth of resources, to respond to incidents of hate and violence. If you would like to, post this at your house, at your work, we've got some posters and you are welcome to have those. One of the resources listed up there is the Attorney General, who we just saw in that video, his website, or there's a website now that has just a huge amount of hate crime resources. And I printed out just a few for folks who feel like they need something print to grab onto. You're welcome to that. I only printed a couple of these, but the Santa Cruz County United Against Hate School Toolkit, this was put out by the County Office of Education, and it also has a lot of cool resources and cool ideas. So you're all welcome to take those. If you'd like to get involved with SCUSIC and do this work, there is a little sign up sheet on the table where the food is. And then, of course, if you registered, you'll also get an email with the information on who to contact to get involved. Santa Cruz County United for Safe and Inclusive Communities. And then I just encourage everybody to grab some snacks and drinks before you go. Thank you for coming.